The Homeless Podcast deals with topics of a sensitive nature and is not intended for all audiences. At times, this podcast may include explicit language or adult themes. Listener discretion is advised.
I had a really bad psychosis from overuse of methamphetamines and some really major personal life trauma. We're trying to be the working middle class, and you are taking that from us. They ridiculed me. They laughed at me. They told me I couldn't come in, and then when I asked them for a blanket, they yelled at me and pretty much told me to fuck myself.
Welcome to the Homeless Podcast, Season 1, Episode 1, a podcast that tells the stories of those that live on the fringe of society. As you listen to these stories, please note that the opinions stated in the Homeless Podcast by guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Homeless Podcast itself. Homelessness is nothing new. It has been around since the beginning of humankind, but recently, it seems that in every major city you will see a homeless person on every block, on every corner. Over the past few months, I have walked the streets of Olympia, Washington, a medium-sized town in the heart of western Washington state, in the shadow of the Capitol building, where lawmakers converge to make decisions that affect us all, where money changes hands via policy and lobbyists, where leaders are either made or broken at the state level. Olympia is an old, beautiful city on the shores of the Puget Sound, an inlet of the Pacific Ocean in Washington state. With a population of roughly 47,000, and founded as a city in 1882 by European settlers, one can't help but take in the old architecture, the unique arts culture, and the homage to the fishing industry on nearly every corner. As you walk the streets, you can hear the call of seagulls, you can smell the salt from the sea, you can feel the dampness of the ocean in the air. Take a drive 42 miles to the west, and you end up in the former logging industry capital of the world, Aberdeen. A town many associate with the true birth of grunge music due to it being the hometown of the late Kurt Cobain, lead singer for the late 80s and early 90s grunge band called Nirvana. I grew up just north of Olympia, 60 miles to be exact, in Bellevue, a suburb of Seattle. I have come home after 21 years to Western Washington and have seen desperation on the faces of so many individuals that I can't keep track as it is a daily occurrence. I have seen tent cities along the side of the interstate, and have felt the brokenness of the human spirit as I walk down the streets of the city. This episode is the story of 4 individuals: Jennifer, Mark, Davey, and Tad. Their names have been changed in order to protect them, but the locations they mention are actual places that have been frequented by many homeless individuals, those seeking help, support, food, warmth, and most importantly, kindness. So let's begin. On this cold December morning, I parked my car on the side of the street in downtown next to the old Capitol Theater built in 1924. I walked down the street, taking in the sights and sounds, and noticed 2 men wrapped in blankets, one playing guitar, the other sleeping. I approached them, asked their names, and offered to buy them lunch. They wanted pizza. I couldn't find any. In 10 minutes, I returned with 2 servings of Russian dumplings and sat down on the cold, wet pavement to talk. I noticed 2 other individuals that were with them then, and decided this would be a great opportunity to ask some pointed questions. All 4 agreed to talk to me. This first episode will focus on Jennifer. In episode 2, I will continue with the stories of Mark, Davey, and Tad. Jennifer sits with her back to the cold pavement. She wears a torn pair of jeans, a dirty turquoise sweatshirt. She has marks on her face that are telltale signs of methamphetamine addiction. She appears to be in her mid-40s, but I found out later she's only 25. Tad sits to her left with a guitar in hand. Mark and Davey are next to her on the other side, Davey wrapped in blankets, and Mark, offering his friends beer, money, and a hit off his marijuana pipe. He's a giver, that's for sure. Jennifer's main beef with the system is not those that are in law enforcement, as you'll hear in the interview. She seems to have a problem with how the system is run, how those that need help are stereotyped. So let's listen to Jennifer.
First off, to begin addressing any social issues, we have to remove our anger at the police, at the bus systems, at the people working at the street level who are not a part of the problem. They're just people trying to support their families and earn a paycheck, doing the career that they were put in themselves. So I can complain about assault charges and things like that all day long. What's that going to do? It's going to make them more mad at us and see us as a person trying to hide something.
Oh, interesting.
I think.
Yeah, so do you think that it's like you kind of get put in a box? Mm-hmm. Like it's not based on individual cases, it's based on you belong here. It's like one category, and do you see it as one category or not one category, or how do you?
Well, what I see it is as like a person who has issues with authority. I see it as, you know, a misunderstanding at many levels. Not that police officers aren't trained to deal with people that have issues, but how much do you want them to take on? Really. And that's not me defending anything or anything like that, but I've been a petty criminal my entire life, and I'll sit there and argue little things with an individual officer all day long because I like to pick their brains.
And some of them you know.
Yeah, sometimes, you know,
sometimes you know the cop.
Yeah, sometimes they're not so bad, but if they have to do their job and issue me a warning or a citation because of something I know I did wrong, I have to accept that. And then in the future, I'm probably going to have more respect from that officer because they're going to see, okay, you know, they admitted that they did something wrong. They're not trying to hide from me, but they still live an alternate lifestyle to the one I am accustomed to.
It's at this moment that I realized something important. My perspective on how others view authority is biased, based on my background both growing up and career-wise. I've just assumed that those on the fringe of society are anti-law, anti-authority. Jennifer clearly has a respect for law enforcement, and while most may think homeless individuals play the victim, she openly owns her history of theft, drug abuse, and what she calls an alternative lifestyle.
I'm a petty thief and I steal dumb shit for a thrill. And I assaulted an officer once, trying to get entrance into a detox center in Spokane. And, you know, really the issue was not necessarily the cops, and that's the truth. It was, was it aggravated by how they responded? At that point, I think we were all a little discharged because I had a really bad psychosis from overuse of methamphetamines and some really major personal life trauma. And when I attempted to get help at a detox center that I was taken to by the hospital that released me in the Valley, they wanted me to sign this stack of paper. It was this thick. I'm not even kidding you. And they wanted me to sign an initial, the whole thing, and then I could go in my room and read it. And I argued it. I argued with them for a good hour, which at that point, I could have had it signed and been in my room. What were they trying to get me to sign that they had such an issue with me reading beforehand?
I've never been admitted to an emergency room for detox or for any other substance abuse issue, and so I wanted to gather a bit of information on how that process works. I called a place that Jennifer mentioned she had checked into and was able to gather a bit of information on the process. I did feel a little bit bad as I needed to state I was seeking information for a friend. I thought maybe that's the only way I'd get the answers I needed. But in the grand scheme of things, perhaps that's what this is actually about. In calling this facility, everything you hear is public knowledge, and should you seek immediate attention for anything drug or alcohol related, please call 911.
Deaconess Hospital, how may I direct your call?
Hi, I was just wondering if I could talk to somebody in the detox center.
We don't have a detox center.
You don't? Who do you refer people to usually when they call about that?
Let me put you over to the case manager in the emergency room. They should be able to help.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Emergency medicine and surgery to oncology and obstetrics. Advanced medical care and tech. Case management.
I did have a quick question for you. I'm just curious about the detox center, how you intake a patient.
Oh, okay. You've reached the ER case manager.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If somebody, that's okay. Who did you ask for? To social work or?
No, exactly what I said to you, and they just shot me over to you.
You asked for social work?
No, I asked for somebody in the detox center. They said they didn't have one, but they could send me to a case manager.
Oh, okay. So, if somebody comes to our emergency room and is going through withdrawals or whatever, we assess. and then we ask them if they want to go to a sobering unit, and then they come and meet with them during the day to talk about their program.
Okay, but if they come in and let's say they don't have a place that they can call home and they come to you, is there a process for that?
Yeah, anybody that comes in. Sometimes they don't have beds, though, so we can't place them.
Right.
Depends on bed availability. The conditions get colder. Usually it's, can be real slim.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine. Do they have a release form when they come in that they need to sign?
Well, a release form in the sense of what? It depends on what program they go to. If they're a heroin or an opiate addict, then we have a Suboxone program called the SMART that is actually, we start dosing medication, Suboxone in the emergency department.
Okay, and that just starts right away.
Yeah. So, and then if it's alcohol related and they're detoxing from that, or having withdrawals,
right,
then we can send them to sobering with Ativan if they have a bed.
Okay.
There's no guarantee on anything, though.
Hey, thank you so much for your help. I appreciate the information. Bye-bye. Still no information on a release form. No information on where they send people if they are short of beds. Granted, I didn't ask that question specifically, but I can imagine it would have been in the form of referring them to a shelter until beds are available. Jennifer will talk about that shortly. Let's get back to her story.
You know what I mean? I never did because I was so... They never gave me the opportunity to read it. By the time everybody became angry, they said, well, we're just leave, and I wouldn't leave because I had nowhere to go. I was scared. I needed help.
Like, you were there.
The free charge I have in Idaho is either petty theft or possession of a controlled substance. In Washington, I've never been charged with a crime outside of that. They dropped it to a misdemeanor assault. Prior to that, it was only third degree because it was not an officer. And then I never paid my fine, but there was no corrective activity that I needed from there.
Oh.
At that point, I did want to be off of the streets. Yeah, I did. Well, I don't remember at that point. It's a bit of a blur, but I think when they went to detain me, I bit one of them on the finger.
Okay.
I spent 3 days in a holding cell.
Yikes.
One of the worst experiences of my life. That's not an issue for here, though. I think that's an issue that the county has always had to contend with the police force amongst the community and the county and state.
Right.
What did you say?
After I was released, I pled guilty. It's the only time I'd ever been charged with a felony. Outside of that, I have minor possession charges for marijuana from Idaho.
Jennifer goes on to talk about waiting for 2 weeks before she could even get a bed at a facility treatment. She claims the state-funded centers are misappropriating funds, and that's why she was, quote, thrown a mattress to sleep on, end quote. She then just went back out onto the streets.
So in that 2 week time, you can sleep on this mat on the floor. We'll give you cigarettes, and you have to wait outside on the streets for 8 hours a day.
Yay.
What are they doing? Putting you out on the street to then...
And you could only be there at nighttime, is that what they're saying?
From what I've gathered, I've had two close calls where I almost actually went into treatment there the first time.
Sounds good, dude.
I had another mental breakdown.
Right.
The cops picked me up. I have no memory outside of waking up in the hospital. I was an unidentified Jane Doe, basically, who was a grave disability because I couldn't even tell them what my name was. And I woke up strapped down on a hospital bed in 4-point restraints that had me locked in this fucking like I couldn't move. I had to be calm and not move for 5 minutes to 15 minutes at a time before they'd unlock my arm. And then before they'd unlock one leg. And the other leg, and then I spent about 4 days in the mental facility unit, whatever, and I had been ruled by the judge a grave disability. I was supposed to stay for 14-day hold. I reasoned with my caseworker that I should be released.
You'll have to pay close attention here to hear Jennifer more. Tad and Mark start discussing over her who will get the next beer and who will go find the funds.
Voluntarily.
Like 20
they released me, and I did go to the detox center.
I have like 63.
They didn't have a bed available. They told me what the scenario would be. I said, I'm not doing it.
Sure. I'm not even kidding.
I'll make
then the second time,
spend it right on beer, and we'll just drink that beer, and then we'll do it again.
That whole part of my life is a bit of a blur. This was all about 2 years ago, right around this time of year.
Right.
Then we'll do it again.
But the deeper issues there were, I had a home with my ex in the valley. We had 2 daughters. We had been targeted, I feel, by CPS because
You are my half sister.
And, you know, I'm not going to go into it a whole lot, but, like, really because we had a lot of friends coming in and out of our house due to the fact that we all were in, like, a family setting with friends from Coeur d'Alene that he did construction with, that they'd, you know, his friends would come by, his co-workers, in the morning to get their tools for their jobs for the day. They'd come by on a Friday to, like, pick up their paycheck. You know, if the boss gave my ex, who was the foreman, the paychecks to hand out, they'd come by to pick up their paycheck. We talked to other guys about weekend job bids and stuff. So we did have a lot of people there. We were targeted as being issues in our neighborhood, and it's like, are you kidding me? We're trying to be the working middle class, and you are taking that from us.
Yeah.
And then we had so many issues within our relationship.
We got an instrument.
I couldn't do the stay-at-home mom thing. He couldn't handle supporting our family on his Idaho wage, because to be in any sort of Washington labor union is very difficult.
Hard to break in.
Yeah, it's really hard, you know? And so it caused a lot of issues. And when I brought to light to the police that there was a domestic violence scenario, instead of being willing to put myself in these shelters that are for battered women and just run off with my kids and throw my ex in jail, I tried to reason with them that I also was part of the issue. Not that I deserved what was happening, but that we were both raised in drastically different households that were violent, mentally and physically. His was the physical abuse, mine was mental manipulation, and we didn't know how to raise a family. We needed help at a bigger level than just the obvious solution. They didn't know how to address it. I didn't know how to address it. I never hid from these officers, from the CPS agent that we had at our home or anything, the fact that, yes, we were casual drug consumers. But at that point, what is the deeper issue? Is it the fact that I'm high on meth because I can't handle my life right now? Or is it that I'm telling you I'm high on meth and you still understand why I'm high on meth, you know?
But what are the obvious solutions? And did you notice that she said she reported a domestic violence issue to the police, but then wanted to share the blame when the authorities showed up? There truly is more to this story that we may never know, but the reality is, Jennifer sees herself as both perpetrator and victim. She blames herself, which affected the relationship she has with the system, which in return she blames herself for. It seems to be a cyclical guilt shift.
Did you feel like targeted through the whole thing, kind of?
I felt targeted by nobody. I felt unseen, unheard, and taken as if my story didn't matter because I wasn't just making the narrative about a success story of a person who was willing to be a poster child for domestic violence reach out thing. And where does that issue begin? I mean, there's so many different areas I could complain about.
Yeah, I get it.
But it's not that system that we need to worry about. It's the mental health. It's how we deal with it. It starts in our schools. It starts in our homes.
Do you think mental health is like the number biggest issue?
I think if we quit addressing it as mental health and mental illness and labeling people and saying that you're this, that, or the other thing and expecting somebody to base who they identify themselves as off a list of DSM-5 category factors in what you say you are.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Like,
kind of. Tell me what DSM is.
Okay, so the DSM is a manual that's come out. There's 5 editions now. And it's for professionals in social work environments
I have yours.
need to bill insurance based on a diagnosis similar to a coding system for any medical diagnosis.
God, I love speakers.
The issue there is you go to your doctor, you tell your doctor you're depressed. They're going to give you a month trial of Zoloft or something. Then they're going to refer you to a clinician. You're going to go to your social worker because they're going to want an official diagnosis from somebody that's a mental health provider. The social worker is either going to say, well, our system our office also has a psychiatrist available, so why don't you make an appointment with them? We'll give you an appointment with the psychiatrist after we pull out this manual. So here's your DSM-5 manual. Here's where that comes in.
Right.
You pull out the manual and you look up depression. You then look at like seasonal depression, major depressive disorder, cyclothymia. One of those, you look at every different category and you sit there with your patient and you read every single list and you go, well, does this one sound more like you? Does this one sound more familiar? And then based on a very loosely based conclusion, you then say, okay, well, from what I've gathered, you have more than 5 of these symptoms. You also have 4 of these symptoms, so we're going to say you have major depressive disorder and rule out something else.
Right.
You know, and then now you're going to go see the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist is going to go, oh, well, let's give you some Seroquel or some Haldol.
And where does all this happen?
Psychiatrists and counseling offices.
Which ones? The ones
state funded.
The ones that you're there by choice.
The ones the ones that
you're there not by choice.
The ones that are
and you can't fucking leave.
Big difference.
The ones that are between you and getting a home.
But I've been there before.
Yeah.
I might have a home, but I've been to one of those.
Yeah, those are the ones between you and your fucking access to housing, or you and your access to being let off DOC corrections, or anything like that. That's redundant.
How do you get put in one that doesn't, like, you're not there by your own choice?
You then pay.
Okay.
There are a billion ways to get there, but if you go to any emergency room and tell them I want to kill myself, you will get automatically put on a 72-hour psychiatric hold.
Okay.
At which point they will evaluate you to see if you need to be held for longer, and longer can mean 2 weeks or the rest of your fucking life.
And that's a prosecutor's decision.
I didn't know that part.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that part.
Yeah. Do you feel like people will choose to say that just so they can find a place to go for?
I have
tried. No.
And then they'll tell you that you're not really suicidal.
I have tried to go to the psych ward after doing a bunch of crimes, and I couldn't get there.
I've tried to get arrested. I've tried to get thrown in the psych ward.
I tried. Once you do a bunch of crimes, you can say you want to kill yourself for weeks and years and months.
Yeah.
And they don't give a shit because you already did the crime.
Yeah, they're like, well, you obviously haven't killed yourself yet.
If you were just a disturbed person that hadn't done any crimes yet, then the whole 72 hour, that whole bullshit happens.
So
you gotta skip towns and move around towns to get a new mental crazy reputation.
Sounds to me like there's more, from what you're saying, sounds to me like there's more care for somebody who's in there like on a first time basis, because maybe we can have an influence and help. Whereas somebody has a record or they've got a history, well, geez, this is their history. So
if you consider that, who's the is the problem the fact that we're coddling to you the first time you go in, acting as if we're here to help you, and then treating you as if you don't as if you're not allowed to claim legitimacy on your equal desire to end your life as before? Because you know what happened to me
You go first. I'll go next.
All right.
You go first. I'll go next.
Are you sure? Go ahead. Here, I'll hit that. Well, you go ahead.
You go first.
Okay.
All right.
I'll hit that. At this point, the foursome started to pass around the marijuana pipe again. They offered me to take a hit. I declined. Jennifer's story is much more complicated than I could have imagined, and here comes the heavy stuff, as if her story isn't heavy enough.
So in September, I wanted to end my life because I missed my kids really bad, and it was really hard. It was my daughter was about to turn 7, and it was really hard. I had a mental breakdown.
So 7 and
4.
Okay.
So I drank a bunch of malt liquor and woke up in front of Safeway crying, just distraught in Shelton. This was in Shelton.
Such things happen.
So me and the cops have sort of developed at least a fairly decent relationship out there. They understand me pretty well.
Yeah.
And
out there in Mason County, they know who I am. So that might have been me.
And also to be clear that not all homeless people are mentally ill or drug addicts as well.
There are some really sane ones, but those guys are weirder than any of this. It's crazy.
Then I'm the weirdest one then.
Well, I want to ask you some questions too when you're done.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to I just sometimes I have so much to say. I talk a lot.
We got all day.
Okay, so I'm going to finish off my story about what happened to me recently, and then I'm going to hand it off because I will take my mic off and quit talking after that.
Sounds good.
Okay, so in September, I wanted to end my life. I was put in the mental hospital in Grays Harbor for 10 days after the hospital in Mason County determined that, in fact, I was a threat to my own life.
Okay.
They put me on the 3-day hold. I refused to even speak to anyone. They gave me a combination of, there was Remeron, gabapentin, Ativan,
The red one.
Yeah, Adderall, not Adderall. I'm like, that's what I would have wanted. A slew of other.
There's a lot of reasons out there.
A slew of other psychotropic medications that placated me enough at that point in time to actually even communicate my issue.
Right.
Yeah.
I spent a few days there. I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. They let me out after 10. But then I had these medication at my disposal. Not the Ativan, but outside of that, I had one that I had trazodone to help me sleep and all this other stuff. Well, I didn't follow up on anything because
Of course not.
I don't.
You're
Once
free
I'm
now.
back on the streets and I can do my dope and smoke my weed and like feel that peace and comfort for a few days, I forget that peer counselor was willing to like take me to a NAMI meeting or something like that. Like that's over my head.
Yeah.
But so I don't follow up on any of that. I don't, see my counselor. I don't do any of that. Well, then a month later, I'm so angry because the shelter there wouldn't let me in at midnight after I'd been trying to fall asleep. So I was exhausted. At the shelter there's a gap between when you can eat dinner and when you can go to bed.
Okay.
So 3-hour gap. I kept falling asleep on the sidewalk, waiting for my time to go back.
Yeah. For bedtime kind of.
Yeah. So I show up there at midnight and I knock on the door. They ridiculed me. They laughed at me. They told me I couldn't come in. And then when I asked them for a blanket, they yelled at me and pretty much told me to fuck myself. Well, what did I have in my purse? I had my trazodone and some other, anti-anxiety medication.
Right.
I popped 7 pills.
If you can hit it, I can't fucking get a single fucking hit out of it. It's so clogged.
4 of my trazodone and 3 of the anti-anxiety ones, which if I hadn't have already been on them periodically here and there, I don't know. I don't know if I would have died or not. But
that sounds like a lot of drugs.
I wanted to die. I didn't die. So I guess but realistically, it could have been enough to end my life. Well, I woke up, I spent a few days in the woods and got back to reality. But yeah, I know. I'm lucky I survived that, let me tell you. But here, long story short, and then I'm going to hand it off, like I said. But the medication that they released me with when I said I wanted to kill myself to help me not want to kill myself is the same medication that I almost ended my life with.
Let's listen to that again.
The medication that they released me with when I said I wanted to kill myself to help me not want to kill myself is the same medication that I almost ended my life with.
Jennifer takes off her mic, hands it to Tad, and stands up. I had the immediate urge to thank her and shake her hand, but something happened. After she said that last phrase, I looked deeper in her eyes, and I saw tears well up. She grabbed her small, dirty backpack, looked away from me, and walked. And that was the last I saw of her. And for the first time, there was silence on the street for a full 30 seconds before anyone talked. The loudest silence I've heard in a long time. Legal drugs, illegal drugs, barbiturates, opioids, endless paperwork, lack of funding, facility admission processes. All of these contribute to the homeless epidemic. Not all resources that are out there are evil. Most come from a space of humanitarian efforts, but where do we start? Jennifer spoke with urgency, as if no one has taken the time to just sit there and to listen. And when she verbalized her truths, she seemed to be telling her story not only to me, but to herself. I watched as reality hit her, as it obviously does over and over again, like a wave forcing a boat to slam into the dock where it's moored. Repeated punches, repeated pain, repeated hopelessness. And the waves keep coming. Of the $1.05 trillion US revenue for the global pharmaceutical market, nearly half of it, roughly $515 billion, comes from the US and Canada. However, the two countries make up only around 7% of the total world population. Jennifer's battle with drugs and her thorough knowledge of each drug's effects led me to conclude that she has seen more pain in her short lifetime than I have in my journeys as a father, as an educator, as someone who has always had a roof over his head. In all honesty, I don't know where this podcast is going, but I do know that I have learned more in the past weeks about homelessness than I ever did when I was a volunteer back in high school, earning merit badges or going on trips with my church youth group. The Drug Addiction Hotline Number National Hotline offers information on addiction and free referral services in both English and in Spanish, 24 hours a day. If you or someone you know needs help, please call 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662 4357. Thank you for listening to the inaugural episode of the Homeless Podcast. Join us in 2 weeks as we look at the stories of Tad, Mark, and Davey, the others you heard on today's episode. Until then, don't look away.